Okay, I'm an addict. I remembered to say that. I was so afraid I'd forget to say that. I brought my props. I just need this to ground me. And I have my medallion. So a lot of passion has been shared from this medallion, from this thing up here. Over the weekend, there was some, amazing passion shared. The depths of our, how low we can sink and the heights of what recovery can bring us. And my brain, my ego wants to make it a competition. And so, I sat out there and thought, I can't compete with that. And last night I kept saying, wait, I was going to say that. He stole what I was going to say. And I remembered that, I don't know that I remembered that, but in speaking with my sponsor afterward, she helped me remember that, that's why we're all here. Because we have so many shared experiences. And when we tell our stories, hopefully as I tell my story, you guys can identify with some of the things that I have to say. I really want to start at the end, and so I'm going to tell a story that happened a few weeks ago. I was visiting my oldest daughter, who's 37 years old, and she was 18 when I got clean. And she still loves me, which is an amazing story in and of itself. I'm really close to her husband as well. I feel like he's the son I never had. And so I was talking to him to start with, and then she joined the conversation about the fact that you guys had asked me to speak at the spring convention. And I was trying to explain to them what that meant to me, and that it was, kind of a big deal. And I talked about some stuff. We talked about recovery. My son-in-law was very interested in not so much the steps, but some of the details about recovery. So I was talking about it. And my daughter said, when we were talking about me speaking, she said, so why do you do that? And I said, well, I do it because I was asked to do it, and I was taught not to say no. And she said, no, I don't mean that. I mean, why do you guys do that? And I said, oh, yeah. Okay. So we do that to share the message of NA. We do that to share that an addict, any addict, can lose. Thank you, because I knew I would not be able to say that under pressure. And Beverly said I should say the rest of it, which is... Thank you. My home group knows I can't quote the basic text worth shit. I just know. That's not how my brain works. And so we were actually sitting in the car because the kids were asleep. So, sitting in the car that day, I remembered that it really isn't about competition. It isn't really about, me making you laugh more than the guy last night, because that can't be done. But, it's about sharing my story and telling you where I came from and telling you how I got to the place where I am today and where I was a few weeks ago. So, I come from I don't know, middle class is raising it a little bit, lower middle class, I guess, home. My dad was a minister, and my mom grew up on a farm and was a stay-at-home mom, and they didn't use drugs or drink. Alcohol is a drug. I had an aunt that was a mess, and she used drugs, and she was kind of held up as what you don't want to be when you grow up. And my dad told me one time when I was a teenager, he said, this would have been back in 1968 or something, and he explained to me about addiction. I'm not sure he used that word, but he said, it runs in our family, and, if you ever start drinking, because he didn't really know about drugs, I don't think, at that point, you may not be able to stop. So, yeah, I listened to that, right? He died a few years later, and I often look back, we all do, what if this, what if that? What if he hadn't died? I don't know if my life would be different. But if my life were different, then I wouldn't be here. And God, where else would I rather be than right here with you guys? I can't wish my life away. I can't wish it were different. I still can't say I'm glad I'm an addict. I've heard people say that over and over. I don't know about that, but, I wouldn't wish it to be any different way. So I remember the first time I got high, and, these parents that I had that were such nice people and all that, they really didn't have a clue about a lot of things, and I, looking back, know that I suffered really badly from anxiety, particularly social anxiety. And so, my mom just said that's ridiculous and went on about her business. And the first time I got high was with my brother, who thought it would be cool to, show me what that was all about. And I'm pretty sure that was the first time in my whole life I ever felt total relaxation and pleasure and happiness. I thought I had found, the answer to everything. Oh, this is how you're supposed to feel. And I remember that feeling of floating, and everything was just so wonderful. And I didn't even wake up with a hangover, so I didn't even understand that there were consequences to this wonderful feeling. And so I proceeded to, take advantage of that as I went on through my teenage years and into college, because, I had to self-medicate, because it was really hard for me to be around people. And so, I remember being completely falling down drunk in college and thinking that was so funny. I mean, how we laugh. And thinking that everybody else probably thought it was funny too, and thinking that I was, delightful. I remember having this cabinet in my closet as a young adult that had my glassware. It was daisies. My friend had roses. I had a bong. I had a long pipe. I had a short pipe. I had a fat pipe. And they all matched. And, some people pick out china. I picked out my pot smoking collection. So codependency is a big part of my story. Domestic violence is a part of my story. I can't separate them. That was one marriage. And there were things that went wrong in that marriage that I'm not prepared to share in a room full of people. So I left that marriage and went to another marriage immediately because, you don't live alone. And he was in favor of a different substance, and so of course I followed right along, and there seemed like there were a lot more consequences to this one. And so I remember I thought that I had invented kiting checks. I thought, hey, look, if we go to the store and we cash a check and we get cash, we buy some groceries and we get cash back, and then I can go to another store and write another check and put that cash in the bank, and that'll cover the first check. I mean, I had that built up so high that eventually, of course, we would spend hours going from grocery store to grocery store to grocery store to grocery store trying to get enough money to put back in the bank to cover the ones that I did the day before. I'm sure I'm not the only one that's done that. And eventually, of course, the whole thing had to collapse. And somehow, although my financial irresponsibility came to light, Nobody seemed to know that I had a problem. Nobody seemed to know that I was using drugs. I was so alone. And this man didn't allow me to have friends. Didn't allow, put it in quotes, didn't allow me to have friends. If I had a friend, then he accused me of sleeping with them. It didn't matter if it was male, female, old, young, whatever. So I was very alone. I know that I can't tell this whole story, so I just am going to go through and talk about when, I remember that I lived in so many different apartments. My daughter went to probably 5 different elementary schools before 4th grade because we kept getting evicted. I remember coming home one day after I'd gotten paid and looking in the drawer where we would put the cash from the paycheck and realizing that he had paid the rent with the paycheck. God knows why, but he really did. And I was so upset. Damn it. There came a point where I gave up. I stopped going to work. I stopped calling in sick. I didn't let him know anything. We had stopped paying the rent. And I had called my mom and I said, we need to come home. I called my mom all the time. I need to talk about my mom a little bit. So I would come up with these stories, the same ones you guys come up with. One of the ones that I remember the most was that I'd been to the dentist and I had such a terrible infection that it had gotten in the bones and it was going to cost $500 to have God knows what done to my teeth, and could she please send me the money because I didn't have the money to do that. And my mom would always say, well, I guess I can get a little more out of your grandmother's retirement fund. I don't know what else to do. And I taught her how to go to Western Union and wire the money to me so that I would have it within hours. Because this dental procedure had to happen today. You know what? I have got to have my water. It's on the floor by you. I meant to bring it up. Thank you. So I called my mom and I said, whatever I said, we got to come home. And started packing up my stuff. I had 2 children and my husband. And, I look back on it and I think, why the hell did I take him with me? I don't really understand. But I did. Because I loved him. And I did love him. That's the thing, is that I did love him. So we packed up. While we were packing stuff up, there was a knock at the door. Oh, God, those knocks at the door. I don't have time to talk about all that. But there was a knock at the door, and it was the rental agent. And he said, we know you're really far behind on the rent, but we wanted to try to help you. And so we thought maybe we could work out some kind of a plan. And I couldn't, I just said thanks, but we're leaving. I couldn't wrap my head around trying to salvage anything. And so we packed up and we went home to live with my mom. And we found all the excuses in the world to drive back. We lived in D.C., so all the excuses in the world to drive back to D.C. and in terrible weather and without asking permission to use her car and all God knows what we came up with and so we would get enough to get high for a minute and last for maybe a day, sometimes if we were lucky. Drive all the way to D.C., drive back to West Virginia, and then be sick again in 2 days. And we did that over and over and over again. And I started stealing money from my mom's. She was the treasurer of her family's corporation and had a checkbook, and I started writing checks and signing her name to it, and I got caught, believe it or not. And the president of the bank had gone to Sunday school my grandmother was his Sunday school teacher. And so he didn't have me arrested. He didn't prosecute because he couldn't do that to my grandmother. Who was dead by then, by the way, but still, her memory, he just couldn't. And so my mom paid the bank back for the money I stole from her. That doesn't even make any sense. And I just felt like, well, thank heaven. So there was an intervention at that point. My brother came home. I was really angry. What the fuck do you mean calling my brother into this? This has nothing to do with him. And so they took us to detox, I guess. The hospital, whatever. Anyway, so we went and stayed for a few days, and I was actually detoxed with a substance, and so I actually was relatively not sick by the end of that and went home. And that ended the trips to D.C., and I think I may have stayed clean a little bit. That was my introduction to NA. I was told that I had to go to counseling, and I went to a drug counselor, and the drug counselor gave me a basic text, and he had a group where I went in. It wasn't NA, it was just a group therapy. I went in, and each week we went in and we talked about a different step. And so by the end of that 12 weeks, I guess it was, I thought I had worked the steps, and I had graduated, and I proceeded to write a letter of amends to my boss that I had just walked out on in D.C., and, it was not a good thing anyway. So, I thought that I was good to go, and, anyway, if I had stopped then, that was in 1994, that would have been awesome, but I didn't. I had another 8 years, I think, in me. And so, of course, we went to another substance. I'm going way too long on the mess. So there came a day. There came a day where I was driving to work, and I always drove to work. I always listened to a particular radio station, and somehow I decided that I was going to look for a different radio station. I didn't know what I was looking for, and I heard a voice, and so I stopped to listen to that voice, and for whatever reason, and you can believe this or not, God spoke to me through that voice and told me that I didn't have to live like this anymore. And so, I got my first spiritual awakening before I even really knew what NA was. And I took that to heart. Somehow that's whatever. And I went home that night, and I just had a different attitude, because for months I'd been using against my will. For months I had come home from work and I had said to myself, I'm not going to do this. And I would, we would eat dinner. I would eat dinner with my kids. My mom was dead by this time. And I would say, I'm going to spend time with my kids. I'm going to put them to bed before I go up to the bedroom and lock the door. And I remember the one night that I thought, why do I keep doing this fight? I'm going to go up there anyway. And I just said whatever, and I'd go up there, and we'd go up and lock the door, and the kids would come up and knock on the door and say, I want to go to bed. And so I would go out, whatever shape I was in, I would go out and I would read them a story. By God, I read them a story every night. Okay? It didn't matter whether I was sick. It didn't matter if I was high. It didn't matter, whatever. I read them a story. And so, that's one thing that I look back on and I think, yeah, I did that right. Maybe. I think they think that. So, I don't know, I lost my train of thought. So I went home that night, and somehow something was different. And so I remember going in the bathroom and shutting the door and hanging on to the sink, white knuckling it, and saying, I don't have to do this anymore. I don't have to do this anymore. And kind of saying a litany of things that I thought would help me. And somehow that showed through, because later on when I went up to bed, I tried to go to bed. We didn't have any drugs that night, by the way, so that helped. But he was really angry, and he accused me, because I was different. There was something different, and he accused me of getting high on the way home. You must have stopped and got something on the way home. And no, I didn't. And it turns out later I found out he actually had gotten high and was high as shit. Didn't share it with me, and so he pulled me up out of the bed by my hair and smacked me across the face, which really was one of the first times he'd ever done that particular thing, split my lip. And I was really kind of in shell shock, like, what? Yeah, wow. And so I turned away from him and went downstairs to get some ice to put on my face, and he followed me downstairs. And he grabbed me by the neck, and he slammed me up against a door. And he kept banging me up against the door, accusing me of all the things that I clearly had done wrong, and cheated on him and gotten drugs. And he wouldn't stop. And the devil, I swear to you, the devil was in his eyes. He'd lost it completely. He wasn't anything real. It was terrifying. And I was codependent and terrified and helpless. And this daughter, that's now 37 years old, that was 18 at the time, came downstairs And she didn't touch either one of us, but she kind of got with us and looked at us and said, "Dad, you've got to stop." And he said, "But she's done, she got high. She did this, she did that." And, my daughter said, doesn't really matter what she did, you've got to stop. So he finally let go. He went upstairs. My daughter went upstairs. And I just stood there. And I thought, I don't know what to do. I can't go upstairs. I can't just go upstairs and go to bed. I can't stay in here. There's no place in this house where I feel safe. And I finally reached out for help for the first time ever in all of this. I finally reached out for help. I didn't call you guys because I didn't know you. But I called my minister in the middle of the night. And she came over and, basically another intervention. And she said, you've been, domestic violence, whole thing. I can't leave you and the kids here. Either he has to leave or you all have to leave. And of course, I didn't want to make him leave and inconvenience him. And so we got I had another child by then. So we got her up and, we all packed up and we left. And we went to a motel. She put us up in a motel. And, I went to the domestic violence shelter the next day, and I'm so grateful to them. I need to shout out to domestic violence workers, because that first day I probably would have gone back home, and she talked to me and told me the whole thing that you all know about domestic violence and don't do it. And so I did it, and I still didn't know what I was going to do, though. How in the hell do you stay clean? How do you stay out of an abusive relationship? And so I went to therapy because it's the only thing I knew to do. And I had a therapist that I didn't even know at the time was one of us. And, I kept saying to her, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to stay clean. And she said, well, they've got these meetings right down the street. And, they're at this church. And I had actually been to one of those meetings, that first intervention. And I picked up a 6-month key tag. Some of the people in this room were actually at that meeting. And I picked up a 6-month key tag because I wasn't going to D.C. every weekend anymore. So I figured, that counted for something. So I knew where the church was, and I knew that those people were kind of strange. And so, I'm like, I don't know about that. And she's like, yeah, they're good people, you really, you ought to go. And I said, I don't know about that. And so really for a couple of weeks, I guess, we went through this dance, of her saying you need to go, me saying me coming in and saying, I don't know how I'm going to stay clean. I don't know how I'm going to not go back. I don't know how I'm going to do this and go to the meetings. Finally, she said, they meet Thursday at 7:30. You are to go to that meeting and then come back and tell me about it. So I said, okay, codependent, yeah, people pleaser, okay, all right, I'll do it. So I went to the church and I went down the hall and I heard the people and I opened the door and all these people turned around and looked at me. Social anxiety, remember? I'm like, oh God. And so immediately somebody stood up and came over. They said, are you looking for a meeting? Yeah, I guess I'm looking for a meeting. She came over and gave me a hug, walked me to the table, pulled out a chair, helped me sit down. I looked at her and I said, I knew I shouldn't have come to this meeting because I was teaching. God knows how I was teaching at a community college. God, that was awful. So I was teaching at a community college. She was one of my students. She did not know that I was her teacher because, she had her own shit going on, and she didn't even recognize me. Then I'm like, oh my God, I knew I shouldn't have come to this meeting. See, I knew I'd find somebody I knew. So I don't remember a whole lot about that meeting, except that after it, everybody said, we meet again on Tuesday, come back. And I said, oh, okay. And so I did. I came back. And after every meeting, they said, keep coming back. And I said, okay. and I did. So there was a meeting where we were reading out of the basic text. And I don't know what we were reading. And, going around the circle, it was my turn to read, and I started reading, and I thought, wait, in my head as I'm reading, how did they know this? How did they know that this is what I was feeling? And I thought, I started crying, and I couldn't stand, so I pass, you read. They handed me tissues, I'm sure they'd seen that before. But yeah, look at this thing. How did they know? And I realized that there were enough people who felt like me that they'd written a book about it. And I just thought that was the most amazing thing. How could that be? And that was so comforting. That was so welcoming. There was another time in early recovery when after the meeting, we went out, we're sitting on the porch, and one of the members said, so tell me how it's going with that thing, whatever, that I had maybe mentioned a week or two before, or the last meeting, who knows. And I remember thinking, wow, she sounds like she really cares. She sounds like she actually remembered that I talked about this. That's pretty amazing. So this was the first time that I'd had a group of friends like this. It was the first time that I'd been in a group where I identified with people and where I felt like I was understood and where I didn't have that social anxiety because they didn't make me anxious, because they welcomed me and they hugged me. And so I kept coming back. I'm still in the same home group, by the way. I've been going every Tuesday and Thursday. I miss one here and there. I'm not real good at going to meetings when I'm on vacation. A lot of people do that. They like going to meetings, social anxiety, remember. So they like going to meetings out of town. And I have done that. And I have done it successfully. And I know that when I go to meetings out of town, people are just as welcoming as they are in my home group. And I recommend it highly. And I hope I do more of it. I keep coming back. There are things I still need to learn, things I still need to do. So in my recovery, there are things that stand out. And so one of the things is my changing relationship with God. Because God is in our steps, you might have noticed. And when I got here, remember I told you my dad was a minister, so when I got here, I had some religion. I had gotten pretty mad at that God in that religion when my dad died, because I didn't really understand how that good, kind, loving God or whatever could have done that. So I really hadn't had a whole lot to do with God. I had some other religious experiences. And I prayed the addict's prayer, God, get me out of this. God, please let me get to the gas station before my car runs out of gas. After I got clean, I stole some money that I had been, like where I'd been stealing it when I was using. I knew that money was there, and I stole some money after I got clean to put gas in my car to get home. And I prayed, let me get to the gas station before I run out of gas. And I didn't. And I think God was answering that prayer. So I learned about humility, really, I think, and the fact that God, to me, my higher power, my understanding is, working through people, listening. Listening is how I hear that message. Opening myself, not being the one that acts like I know it all, and that's a change. So when I stole that money, I stole quite a bit of money. So it's a lot more than I needed to put gas in the tank to get home. Nobody ever knew that I had taken, at least nobody ever said anything, so I really thought it was a pretty sweet spot to get money. And I found out that doing it clean didn't really feel quite as good. And then came the day when she told me, the boss said, I think so-and-so stole money because there's money missing. And it has to have been that person because they kind of looked like a low-life. They were doing community service, probably had an addiction problem, which I obviously didn't. And so I called somebody in the program, probably my sponsor at the time, and said, I don't know what to do. I stole money. They're blaming somebody else. Maybe I could just put the money back without anybody knowing, and they'll see the money's back. And my sponsor was like, no, pretty sure you got to go tell her that you took the money. And I'm like, no, wait, that's not going to happen. And so I called a friend and said, I stole some money, and pretty sure you got to tell her that you stole the money. And so I asked another friend, pretty sure you got to tell her that you stole the money. So I went in, I walked into her office, I said, I stole the money. And I said, and of course I couldn't do that until I could pay it back, because you got to have the solution before you can talk about the problem, right? I said, here's the money. I stole it. And she said, why didn't you tell me that you needed money? And I feel like that's God working in my life. That's God teaching me about asking for help and humility and honesty, and that's the way that I hear God speaking. What time is it? I'm sorry. Am I just babbling? Am I okay?
You're good.
All right. So early on, some of the home group members were going to this thing called Area Service. And they said, do you want to go? Sure, I'll go. And so I went, and I thought, oh, this is where, like, the cool people are. And I'm still in service because that's where the cool people are. So I really like that. I like being a part. It's really easier for me to participate in things. It's really easier for me to come to convention. It's easier for me to do things when I have a role. It's still really hard for me to come and just be a person. I remember coming to convention, and I'd been to a bunch of them, and seeing people hugging and stuff, and thinking, why aren't they hugging me? And I don't have friends like that, and I wish I could come and people would recognize me. And ego. And I guess at some point I kind of became aware that if I hugged other people, and if I said, oh my God, it's so good to see you, and gave them a hug, then that in turn allowed them to hug me back. And so I've learned a lot about managing my social anxiety through coming to convention. The first convention that I came to, I'm pretty sure I had maybe 6 weeks clean. And I came and I brought my daughter. I just came for the day. I had no intention of spending the night. And I would have gone to the dining hall and the whole clean time countdown thing, and oh my God. And then I came down here and stood, different building, different door, but you remember. Came in the door and they were having the dance. And I came in the door and I looked around and I was like, I gotta go home. And so, it was just way too much. So those of you that are at your first convention, just keep coming back. Please keep coming back. It may feel overwhelming, but oh my God, keep coming back. And when you see somebody you recognize, give them a hug and say, oh my God, I'm so glad to see you. It's so awesome. It's how we learn to be social. It's how we learn, it's how we learn to love and to be loved. So I'm really grateful for service and convention. I love going to regional service. I've been going to regional service most of the time. I got mad at one point. Somebody was just an ass, and I left the meeting and walked outside on the bench and called my sponsor, and I was like, oh my God, it's so stupid. It's such a stupid. And I took a break. I decided I don't need to do this. So I took a break for a while. But I came back because once it's in, I don't know, for me, it was in my blood. I couldn't stay away. I came back. I love regional service. I love being a part of planning the services that carry the message to the addicts that are still suffering and those of us who just need to reach out. I love planning, how to keep the phone line going. I love planning, putting up billboards that say, do you have a problem? Call us. I love that part. And I love the fact that you may not realize this, but it's a pretty small group that comes up here. We really could use some help. And so there's people that are true family to me, people that I see, every quarter, plus the conventions like 6-7 times a year. I can't count, but whatever. Yeah, I guess 7 times a year. I'm so close with those people, and so service is about a lot more than just having a role to play. It started out being just having a role to play, but it became a lot more. So I did sponsor first. So my first sponsor was online. While I was still using, I looked up NA. I guess after that first intervention, when I'd been introduced to NA, I looked up NA online and I found the NA chat rooms. I guess they still have those. I don't know, but I went to some NA, and there was a lot of drama in those NA chat rooms. Let me tell you. But there was a woman that kept cropping up, and so when I got clean, I didn't want to ask one of you guys to be my sponsor, So I asked her to be my sponsor online. That really didn't work out too well. There was a day in fairly early recovery. Well, it hadn't been real early recovery, and I got a cutoff notice for the electricity bill, and I called her and I said, I just got this cutoff notice, and she said, wow, yeah, I bet you really want to use, don't you? I know. And she started telling me about this bunch of stuff, and I'm like, well, no, actually it never crossed my mind to use. I just don't know what to do, and so I figured she really wasn't getting. I don't know. We weren't really in tune. And so I got my meeting list, and I looked on the back of it, and I found the number of a woman that was in my home group. And I reached out for help, and I called her. And her husband answered the phone, and he said, well, she's out mowing the grass. And I'm like, oh, thank God. Okay, good. Don't bother her. I'll call back later. It's not that important. And he was like, no, hang on. she needs to take a break. She'll come and talk to you. I'm like, okay. I was so angry about that bill because I called the electric company and I said, let's make a payment plan. Okay. And they're like, this was the payment plan. I'm like, not wanting to actually say it, but in my head, I'm like, but I'm clean now. You don't understand. I'll really pay it this time. So my friend answered the phone, and I explained the situation, and I wasn't asking her for money. That wasn't even part of what I was thinking. It certainly wasn't part of what she was thinking. And so she helped me brainstorm, and she helped me, reach out for help. She said, there are agencies that help people who have cutoff notices. I'm like, oh, there are? Okay. And so I actually went, and it was, humility, ego, humility, ego, humility. And I actually went to these places and I said, hey, I can't pay my electric bill. I have a cutoff notice. And they helped me pay the bill. And so, I keep coming back to the asking for help because this is a we program. It's I can't do this by myself. I've never been able to do it by myself. I can't do it by myself now. I couldn't do it by myself then. So through this program, I've learned to ask for help. So I had another 2 or 3 sponsors, and each one of them, I did finally start asking real people. And each one of them brought something to my life. Each one of them had a message for me. Each one of them was an important part of my recovery and my steps to growing and learning more about myself. But, Beverly already pointed out that I really did. When I first came to Region, okay, I walked into Region and there was this loudmouth, cussing ass woman and another one who I found out was her sister. And I'm like, who the hell are these women? But I wanted to be like them. I thought, they don't have social anxiety. And I really admired their passion, and I admired, dedication, and I was devastated when she went back out. I'm like, wait, what? But she had such a good program. She was so passionate. She was so involved. How does that happen? And I didn't understand. And then I saw her at Thanksgiving at Away. Oh man, if you guys didn't get a chance to do Thanksgiving Away during its heyday, I hope it comes back. That was awesome. Talk about hundreds of addicts in a very small room where the temperature would be 150 degrees by the time you'd leave, and some good food. And she had a little bit of time clean, and I was so grateful. And indeed, I waited until she had a year clean, asked her to be my sponsor. And how long ago was that? 14 years ago. And we've been such a good fit. I call her, not every day, but I call her 3 to 5 times a week, every week, for 14 years. It's really important to me in the sponsorship relationship to keep tabs, to know what's going on. this bullshit about calling somebody after 3 months and saying, oh my God, I've got all this drama in my life, and you have to listen for 3 hours while they catch you up to everything they've done. Like, why didn't you call me and I'd know what was going on and then we could talk about it? So we know what's going on. Sharing a step is undoubtedly one of the most spiritual things I've experienced. Higher power definitely works when 2 or more addicts are together talking about Narcotics Anonymous, talking about spiritual things, talking about honesty, talking about the steps. And, that's just been my experience, that sharing is, whether I'm the sponsor or whether I'm the sponsee, that intimacy of sitting down and sharing steps is there's nothing like it. I highly recommend it to any of you who haven't done it yet. It's amazing. And so I remember working my first step. I'm not going to go through all the steps. Relax. Okay? But I do remember one time working my first step. I've worked my first step several times. And it was, it was early in recovery, and I had my little workbook and a clean journal, and I had taken my daughter to dance class, and it was a beautiful early summer day, and the sun was out, and the birds were chirping, and the, blossoms were there. It was gorgeous, and I just remember that pink cloud. That's all. I don't have anywhere else to go with that. It just was a wonderful feeling right on that. I remember sharing my 4th step. It was also outside. And learning that I'm not unique. This social anxiety stuff, is ego. It's about me thinking that I need to be perfect. It's about me thinking that nobody else makes mistakes. It's about me thinking that I shouldn't make mistakes. And I learned that I'm not unique. I learned that it's okay to make mistakes. Damn, this was outside too. I was writing on my 9th step, I guess. And I was writing about how to make amends to my daughter, this same daughter. I do have other daughters, but she was the oldest, and her whole life was me and addiction. And so I was trying to figure out how to make amends to her, particularly because of the time that we gave her this adorable pair of Barbie roller skates for her birthday. And the next day we took them back. We promised her that we would get them again, but we never did. And I wanted to make that go away. I had spent all my recovery up to that point wanting to make that go away. I wanted that to not be part of my story. I wanted that to not have happened. I wanted to somehow make up for that. And I got so upset while I was writing on the step. As a matter of fact, I started writing on the step at McDonald's with a thing of pancakes in front of me, and I'm like, I'm going to write on steps while my daughter was taking the ACTs or something, and I immediately realized, this is not McDonald's step writing, and I got up and I got in the car and went to a really pretty place, and again, she would have to tell me what she told me because I don't remember, except that it was a quote from Oprah or Maya. What?
You can't change the past.
Yeah, forgiveness is about not changing the past. I don't know how that went. So whatever it was, it's not the words, it's the feelings, right? So whatever it was, it made me realize I finally, up until that point, I had a lot of years clean when I was working on my 9th step, let me tell you, because I was coming up on 10 years clean, and I thought, I really need to have worked all 12 steps when I get 10 years clean. I'm going to have the decade clean. I still haven't worked all the steps. And so, so I really was trying to get these done. So I had a lot of years clean, and I'd spent all that time with this guilt and curling up in the fetal position because I couldn't make the past go away, and I didn't know how I was ever going to live with that. And something about the interaction, something about the place where I was allowed me to let that go. And that was one of the biggest things that has happened to me in recovery.
I got forgiveness is giving up the hope that the past could have been different.
Giving up the hope that your past could have been different. Yeah, see? All right. I feel like time is running out and I need to wrap this up. Go to meetings, talk about that. I talked about the steps. I talked about the sponsor. I talked about God. How about no pick up, no matter what? Yeah.